let me come back to this whole three pillars that slow food really talks about, and I want to talk to you a little bit about the biological and cultural diversity, which is one of the pillars that you talk about. And you do a lot of initiatives out there. So tell us, how do you take it to the consumer? How do you take it to the stakeholders? How do you take it to the farmers? And how does the vision of biological and ecological diversity, how do you put it to, maybe you can talk about that.
Okay. Thank you. If I can just give a little bit of background in regards to our three pillars, is that in 2017, we had an international congress that was held in Chengdu in China. Prior to that date, we had a foundation of biodiversity where we worked with our biodiversity projects and campaigns and so forth and so forth. It wasn't until 2017 that we started to bring all the things that we'd been doing for 30 years into a communication that was clearer. Okay, we'd always been doing the work, but we hadn't been clear, especially in English, we hadn't been so clear in how we approach it, because obviously Slow Food is an Italian organization. So it was clear in an Italian context, but it wasn't clear in our messaging to get that message out into the majority of where our network exists in English speaking. So it was reworded and put into a more strategic approach to divide our three pillars, being that the work that we'd always done, we'd always been working with biodiversity and defending culture and biodiversity. We'd always been working with education, and we'd always been working with advocacy, but we really didn't know what we were doing with that one. So by developing a document, which we call this call to action, is to try and not just get people in the head office in Bra, in Italy, activated, but get everybody involved and to give a clear understanding for everybody of how they can be involved no matter where you are around the world. So the three pillars being biodiversity, education, and advocacy, we gave clear objectives, which means that our objective is to defend biodiversity. And we're talking about food biodiversity. So food biodiversity, we also have our projects. We have what we refer to as the Ark of Taste, which is like Noah's Ark. But the food context is we want to identify those foods that are at risk of being lost, okay, or extinction. And they are foods that are connected to a culture and also to a territory. So in that, we ask everybody around the world if there are foods that they know of that might be at risk of being lost. Either they're not being consumed anymore because there is a industrial globalized substitute, or as we talked about before, there are farmers moving away and they do not grow that food anymore. Or there is other production that's coming in for high yield, for an economic benefit, and the social and the cultural and the environmental benefits are not being considered. So those products are at risk of being lost. They're nominated, they're put onto a catalogue that's on our international website. We then move
Give me some examples of such food that's getting lost, and maybe you can pick up a couple of countries where it's getting lost, and that can be interesting learning for our audience.
Okay. The food's getting lost globally because of the industrial food system, and also because people are moving away from the farming and they will go to buy something from a shop or from a market rather than growing it themselves. So that is it's a global phenomenon. It's not just in one country. There are over 6,000 products that have been nominated globally. If I can pick some categories of products that are referenced around the world. If we look at rice, for example, there are thousands of traditional rices that have been grown in Asia, in Africa, and wild rices in Americas, and so forth and so forth. They're not grown anymore. They now have high-yielding rices, whether it be Thailand, whether it be Vietnam, Also in the Philippines, they went into a green revolution to bring the hybrids in to look at high-yielding products. It meant that farmers started growing high-yielding rices rather than growing their traditional rices. The traditional rices were selected year from year and selected of what would be growing dependent upon their climatic circumstances. The industrial rices or the hybrid rices were given and grown based on a high yield production to sell to someone else. So that indigenous or local traditional knowledge was being lost for high yielding to feed the world, for the example. Rices, there are thousands of rices that are being lost. There are many fruits that are being lost. I'll give 2 examples that we're looking at in the Philippines, for example. We have a community in the mountains of the Philippines that have 33 different rice varieties. The Green Revolution and the government interventions asked them to start growing the hybrid rices for not only producing more rice for themselves, but also to be able to sell, based on they wanted to improve livelihoods. Okay, with that, soil degradation took place. These farmers don't have the capacity, don't have the ability to use machinery. In 10 years, those rices didn't grow anymore. So what they're doing now is they're reintroducing the traditional rice varieties because it provides them food security. Okay, whereas the hybrid rices don't, because it wasn't being grown for food security, it was being grown for exportation. Okay, so the communities are reintroducing the 33 slowly. It means now they're actually able to choose those rice varieties that they want to grow based on they have drought at the moment. So they have the rice varieties to grow for drought. They still have the knowledge, so then they pick and choose to ensure that they have the rice varieties. Same things taking place in Thailand, in Vietnam, in rice-producing countries, in Asia, and also in India. So it's a global phenomenon, and that's just, we can look at many products, whether it's salt, whether it's fish, whether it's any product that we eat on a daily basis, of understanding where the food comes from and what's being substituted from industrial foods or high yielding foods.